Hi everyone, in this new tutorial I'm going to show you how to handle error with the try statements. So the try statement is used to avoid code break because of an error. The statement generally has a second part, which is the except part, which is to give an alternative to something. For example, to assign a default value to a variable. Let me give you further explanation with a practical example. For example, let's go back in our Hello World project, and to keep it very simple, let's consider that we want to write a code that asks to a user his age and compute his birth year. So to ask something from the user, you remember from the previous tutorial we said that we should use the input built-in function. Therefore, I'm going to define a variable called your name. It is equal to the input function, and inside I say what's your age. I put a space. Beautiful. Now I want to define another variable which we store the birth year, so I define a variable that I will call birth year, and it is equal to, if we assume that we are asking in 2020, we are going to say that it will be equal to 2020 minus his age, so I say your age. Now look here, I've consciously made a mistake to show you something. Instead of writing this variable as your age, I've written your name. Now if I want to change it, I could just change it here to age, but the problem is that it will not change here. So imagine a code of 1000 rows. If I want to manually change it everywhere in the code, it will be very boring. That's why I want to show you a PyCharm function which helps you to change any variable in the code. So in order to change your name, you right click and you go to refactor, you take rename, and you change the name of the variable. You call it, for example, age, and you see he has changed here and he has changed also here. And if I had a code of 1000 or million of rows, it will go and change the same variable everywhere. Now coming back to our example, we need to convert this value to a float number. You remember the input function returns a value in a string data type, so we need to convert it, and we use the built-in function float to convert value to float numbers. Beautiful. And if I want to print finally the birth year, very good. So let's run the code and see the result. So it says what's your age, I say 25, and if I press enter, it says I was born in 1995. Now listen carefully, because this is what I want to show you. Imagine that I run the code again, and the user, instead of giving a value instead of giving me a number, he says, for example, he gives me, for example, a letter, let's say Z. The program will not be able to convert Z to a float because Z is not a number, so it's not possible to convert this to a float. That's why I'm going to have an error, because you cannot do 2020 minus Z. So if I press enter, you see I will have an error. Now what's the error? What is very important is this: it's a value error type. This is where the try statement comes in. So to avoid this kind of error, we can say that the program should just try to do this. You remember, for space, and we indent also this by pressing the tab. Very good. So the program is going to try to get this input and convert it to a float. If the program cannot convert this your age to a float, we are going to assign a default value to the birth year. So in this case we say except. Now remember the error that we saw, it was a value error, and we put 2 point, and we say in that case, instead of putting an error, you should say the birth year is equal to, for example, 1990. If I run the code again and it says what's your age, I've said for example let's say 35, and if I press enter it gives the good answer. But if I run again and I say for example Z, which is the wrong value, I will no more have an error. Let's press enter and you see, so I don't have error in this case, but it has assigned the default value, which is 90, so which is this value. So this is how you can avoid your code to crash when there is an error. You can assign a value, and if there is a possible error that can occur, you can assign a default value to your variable to allow your code to continue running. There are many other types of errors in Python, but the idea is the same. To avoid those kind of errors, you just have to say try and you say what the code should do, and if there is a possibility that that error can occur, you can say except and you put the name of that error and you say what the code should do in that other case. It's the end of this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to receive more videos like this. Ciao.